The champagne flutes caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the country club's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting prismatic reflections across white linen tablecloths laden with finger sandwiches and pastel-colored macarons. Sofia Chen stood beside the three-tiered diaper cake, one hand resting protectively on her 32-week belly, the other holding a glass of what was supposed to be sparkling apple cider. Her sister-in-law, Melissa Hartley, had just handed it to her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. To the mother-to-be, Melissa announced, her voice carrying across the private event space where 40 women had gathered to celebrate Sofia's impending motherhood. May your daughter be as blessed as she is loved. Sofia raised her glass with the others, but something made her hesitate before drinking. Maybe it was the way Melissa's fingers had lingered on the stem when passing the flute. Maybe it was the too bright gleam in her sister-in-law's eyes. Or maybe it was 12 years of training that had honed Sofia's instincts into something sharp enough to cut glass. She brought the rim to her lips and pretended to sip while actually pressing her tongue against the opening to prevent any liquid from entering her mouth. The scent hit her immediately. Under the apple sweetness, there was something chemical, something that didn't belong. Her pulse quickened, but her expression remained serene as she lowered the glass and turned to accept congratulations from her best friend, Rachel Kim, who'd flown in from DC for the occasion. "How are you feeling?" Rachel asked quietly, her dark eyes scanning Sofia's face with the practiced assessment of someone who'd worked alongside her in the DEA's Undercover Operations Division for 8 years. "Thirsty," Sofia replied, the single word carrying volumes of meaning that only Rachel would understand. "I think I'll get some water from the kitchen." She moved through the crowd of guests, co-workers from the accounting firm where she supposedly worked, neighbors from their suburban Chicago neighborhood, women from her husband Marco's extended family who'd never fully accepted her into their tight-knit Italian-American circle. Melissa watched her progress across the room with an expression Sofia couldn't quite read, something between satisfaction and anticipation. In the country club's professional kitchen, Sofia found a clean glass and filled it from the tap, her mind racing through possibilities. Someone had spiked her drink. The question was what they'd used and why. She pulled out her phone and texted Rachel a single emoji, the red flag they'd established years ago as their emergency signal. Rachel appeared 30 seconds later, closing the kitchen door behind her. "Talk to me." "My drink was contaminated." Sofia kept her voice low and steady. "I didn't ingest any, but I need you to secure the glass without making a scene. Can you swap it for yours when we go back out?" "Done." "What are we thinking? Alcohol? Something worse?" "I don't know yet, but Melissa handed it directly to me. She made sure I got that specific glass." Sofia felt her daughter kick against her ribs, as if sensing her mother's elevated heart rate. "This wasn't an accident, Rach. Should we call it in?" Sofia was quiet for a moment, thinking about her cover, about the 2-year operation that had finally led them to Victor Russo's distribution network, about the fact that Marco's uncle Tony had business dealings with 3 of Russo's known associates. She thought about the phone call she'd overheard last week when Melissa didn't know Sofia was home early, something about taking care of the problem and making sure she's out of the picture. "Not yet," she said finally. "But I need you to keep that glass safe. If anything happens to me or the baby, it's evidence." They returned to the party with Sofia carrying her water glass and Rachel discreetly pocketing the champagne flute in a way that would have impressed a magician. The baby shower continued with the ritual opening of gifts, tiny onesies and plush animals, a top-of-the-line stroller from Marco's parents, a handmade quilt from Sofia's aunt in Taiwan. Through it all, Sofia watched Melissa watching her, noting the way her sister-in-law's smile grew tighter each time Sofia took a deliberate sip of water instead of the spiked cider. "You're not drinking your special toast," Melissa said eventually, appearing at Sofia's elbow with false concern. "Is something wrong with it?" "I switched to water," Sofia replied with her best pregnant woman smile. "The carbonation was making me nauseous. But thank you so much for putting this all together, Melissa. It's absolutely beautiful." The lie came as easily as breathing, 14 years of undercover work having taught her to wear deception like a comfortable sweater. But underneath, her mind was cataloging evidence, Melissa's micro-expression of disappointment, the way she glanced toward the kitchen as if calculating whether there was still time to try again, the nervous energy that seemed to vibrate through her designer dress. Marco arrived as the party was winding down, his tall frame filling the doorway as he scanned the room for his wife. At 35, he still had the athletic build of the college baseball player he'd once been, though his dark hair now showed silver at the temples. When his eyes found Sofia, his entire face transformed with a smile that still made her heart skip after 6 years of marriage. "How's my beautiful wife?" He crossed the room to kiss her forehead, one hand gently touching her belly. "And how's our little troublemaker?" "Both doing well," Sofia said, leaning into his warmth. "Though I think someone's getting impatient to make her debut." Melissa appeared at Marco's other side, pressing a kiss to her brother's cheek. "Doesn't she look exhausted, Marco? All this excitement isn't good for her. You should get her home to rest." There was something in her tone, something that made the hair on Sofia's neck prickle with warning. She watched Marco's face, saw him register his sister's unusual concern, saw the brief flicker of confusion before familial loyalty overrode his instincts. "Mel's right, Sof. Let me get you home." He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they made their goodbyes. "Thank you for this, Mel. It means a lot that you put together something so special." In the car, Sofia stared out the window at the Chicago suburbs rolling past, her reflection superimposed over manicured lawns and two-story colonials. Marco's hand found hers across the center console. "Something's bothering you," he said quietly. "I know that look. Talk to me." She wanted to. God, she wanted to tell him everything, about her real job, about the investigation, about the spiked drink and the growing certainty that his sister was involved in something dangerous. But operational security was paramount, and Marco's entire family was tangled up in her case in ways he couldn't know about yet. "Just tired," she said instead, squeezing his fingers. "And worried about becoming a mom. What if I'm not good at it?" "Sofia." He waited until they reached a red light so he could look at her properly. "You're going to be an amazing mother. You're smart, strong, patient, and you love this little girl already. I see it every time you touch your belly." The tenderness in his voice made her throat tight. Marco Chen Hartley, with his half-Italian, half-Chinese heritage and his complete inability to lie convincingly, had no idea he'd married a woman who lied professionally. Who had built an entire false identity so thoroughly that even he believed she was a senior accountant at Morrison & Pierce, not a decorated DEA special agent who'd spent the last 2 years infiltrating organized crime networks. Their house was a 3-bedroom ranch in Oak Park, carefully chosen for its proximity to both Marco's family and the various targets in Sofia's investigation. As Marco helped her out of the car, Sofia noticed a black sedan parked 3 houses down that hadn't been there when they left. The driver's face was obscured by shadow, but the vehicle's positioning gave it a clear view of their front door. "Marco," she said carefully. "Do you recognize that car?" He followed her gaze and frowned. "No." "Why?" "Just curious. I don't think I've seen it in the neighborhood before." They went inside, and Marco immediately began fussing over her, insisting she elevate her feet while he made dinner. Sofia let him, using the time to text her handler a coded message that would trigger a license plate check on the sedan. Within minutes, her phone buzzed with a response that made her stomach drop. The car was registered to Apex Security Consulting, a known front company for Victor Russo's enforcement operations. She was under surveillance. The question was whether they suspected she was DEA or if this was connected to whatever Melissa had planned at the baby shower. That night, Sofia lay awake listening to Marco's steady breathing beside her, feeling their daughter's restless movements beneath her skin. At 3 a.m., her phone vibrated with an encrypted message from Rachel, "Lab results back. GHB in the glass. Enough to knock you out and potentially harm the baby. This is attempted assault on a federal officer and endangerment of a child. We need to move on this now. GHB. Gamma-hydroxybutyric acid. The date rape drug." If Sofia had actually consumed what Melissa gave her, she would have lost consciousness within minutes. while pregnant. At a baby shower surrounded by witnesses who would all testify that she'd simply had too much excitement and needed rest. And whatever happened after that, a fall, a car accident, something that could be passed off as tragic but accidental, would have been blamed on her supposed incapacitation. Melissa hadn't just tried to drug her. She tried to orchestrate her death and their daughter's death in a way that would look like natural causes or tragic circumstance. Sofia's hand moved to her belly, protective instinct flaring white-hot. She thought about the investigation, about the carefully laid plans to take down Russo's entire network in a coordinated sweep. She thought about Marco, sleeping peacefully beside her, unaware that his sister was a would-be murderer. She thought about the oath she'd taken 14 years ago when she'd graduated from Quantico, to protect and serve, to uphold the law, to be brave in the face of danger. And she thought about her daughter, who would be born into a world where family could be the most dangerous thing of all. Sofia slid out of bed carefully, padding to the nursery they'd spent months preparing. The walls were painted soft yellow, decorated with hand-stenciled clouds and birds. A white crib stood ready, waiting for the tiny human who currently used Sofia's ribs as a soccer ball. She sat in the rocking chair Marco had bought at an estate sale and lovingly refinished, running her hands over the smooth wood. Her phone buzzed again. Another encrypted message, this time from her handler, Assistant Director James Walsh. Your cover may be compromised. Melissa Hartley made 3 calls to known Russo associates in the 48 hours before the baby shower. We're tracking her movements now. Recommend immediate extraction. Extraction. The word felt heavy, final. It would mean the end of her cover, the end of the investigation as she knew it, potentially the end of her marriage when Marco learned the truth about who she really was. But it might also mean staying alive long enough to give birth to their daughter. She typed back, what about the operation? We're 3 weeks from the coordinated takedown. If I extract now, we lose everything. The response came quickly, you're 32 weeks pregnant and someone just tried to drug you with enough GHB to cause serious harm. Your safety and your child's safety are the priority here, Agent Chen. We can rebuild the operation. Agent Chen. It had been so long since anyone called her that outside of secure communications. For 2 years, she'd been Sofia the accountant, Sofia the pregnant wife, Sofia the woman who didn't quite fit into the Hartley family's expectations but tried so hard to belong. The identity had become comfortable, almost real. But Agent Chen was who she actually was. A woman who'd put away 37 drug traffickers, who'd testified in federal court against cartel lieutenants, who'd once spent 6 months living in a one-room apartment with a meth cook to gather evidence. A woman who'd given up pieces of herself, the ability to fully trust, the luxury of honesty, the simple pleasure of being known, for the job. A soft sound made her turn. Marco stood in the nursery doorway, his expression concerned and confused. Sof? What are you doing up? Is everything okay with the baby? She looked at her husband, at the man who'd proposed on their 3rd date because he said he'd known immediately that she was the one, at the man who'd held her hand through every ultrasound and read parenting books with the same intensity he brought to his work as a structural engineer. The man who thought he knew her. Marco, we need to talk, she said quietly. But not here. Not in the house. His confusion deepened into worry. What? Sofia, what's going on? I need you to trust me. Get dressed, don't say anything specific, and meet me at the car. 5 minutes. Something in her tone, the command voice she used in tactical situations, made him nod without arguing. While he dressed, Sofia moved through the house with practiced efficiency, gathering her go-bag from its hiding place in the basement, along with a second bag she'd prepared months ago with Marco's documents in case she ever needed to evacuate him quickly. She also retrieved her service weapon from the safe in their bedroom closet, a Glock 19 she'd told Marco was for home defense, letting him assume she'd taken a basic gun safety course. He didn't know she'd qualified as an expert marksman for 12 consecutive years. In the car, Sofia drove them to a 24-hour diner 40 minutes away, checking constantly for tails. Marco sat in the passenger seat radiating barely contained questions, his hand alternating between gripping the door handle and reaching for hers. The diner was nearly empty at 4 a.m., just a handful of truckers and night shift workers nursing coffee and pie. Sofia chose a corner booth with clear sight lines to all entrances and exits, years of training overriding the fiction of being a regular civilian. "Okay," Marco said once they'd ordered coffee for him and herbal tea for her. "I've been patient, but you need to tell me what the hell is happening." "You're scaring me, Sof." She reached across the table and took both his hands in hers, memorizing the warmth of his skin, the familiar calluses from his weekend woodworking projects. This might be the last time he let her touch him voluntarily. "My name is Sofia Chen," she began. "That part is true. But I'm not an accountant at Morrison & Pierce. I never have been. I'm a special agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration, and for the past 2 years, I've been working undercover to build a case against a major distribution network operating in the Chicago area." Marco's face went blank, shock wiping away all expression. His hands remained in hers, but they'd gone limp, unresponsive. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're what?" "I'm a federal agent. I've been a federal agent since I graduated from Quantico 14 years ago. Everything about my accounting job, my background at Morrison & Pierce, it's all part of my cover identity." "You've been lying to me." The words came out flat, emotionless, which was somehow worse than anger would have been. "For 2 years. Our entire marriage." "For 6 years," Sofia corrected quietly, because he deserved the truth now, all of it. "I was undercover when we met. The operation expanded, and I needed to establish deeper ties to the community. Our relationship, it started as part of my cover. But Marco, you have to believe me, what I feel for you, what we have, that's real. That was never part of the job." He pulled his hands away from hers as if she'd burned him, sliding back in the booth until he hit the wall. His eyes were dark with betrayal, with the kind of pain that comes from having your entire reality rewritten. "Our wedding was part of your cover. The baby," he looked at her belly with dawning horror. "Jesus Christ, Sofia, was getting pregnant part of your operation?" "No." She reached for him again but he flinched away. "Marco, no. The pregnancy was a surprise, a beautiful surprise. I was going to request extraction when I found out, but then we learned that your Uncle Tony was connected to people we'd been investigating. And your sister, my family?" His voice climbed dangerously. "You targeted my family? You married me to get to my family? I married you because I love you." Her voice cracked, years of professional control finally fracturing under the weight of his pain. "Everything else is true, Marco. My feelings, our life together, the future we've planned, that's all real. But yesterday at the baby shower, Melissa put GHB in my drink. Enough to knock me unconscious and potentially cause serious harm to our baby." The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a gunshot. Marco's face cycled through disbelief, denial, and then a dawning horror that told Sofia he was remembering things: his sister's odd behavior, her financial problems, her new boyfriend who Marco had never liked. "You're saying my sister tried to drug you? To hurt you and the baby?" He shook his head violently. "No. No, Melissa wouldn't. She's been excited about being an aunt. She threw you that entire party. She threw me a party where she had access to the drinks and could hand me a specific glass while everyone watched." Sofia pulled out her phone and showed him the lab results Rachel had forwarded. "We had the glass tested. This isn't a suspicion or a theory, Marco. This is evidence." He stared at the screen, his engineering mind processing data even as his heart rebelled against the conclusions. Why would she do that? What possible reason? She's been in contact with members of Victor Russo's organization. 3 phone calls in the 2 days before the shower. "We think she either knows or suspects what I am, and someone decided I needed to be eliminated before I could testify at the grand jury hearing scheduled for next month." Victor Russo. Marco said the name like a curse. "The guy Uncle Tony supposedly just does accounting for?" "Uncle Tony doesn't just do accounting. He's been laundering money through his construction company for the past 5 years. We have evidence of at least 15 million in illicit funds being cleaned through fake contracts and inflated project costs. Sofia watched her husband's face as she dismantled his family, piece by piece. Your cousin Nate has been running protection for shipments coming through the port. Your mother's best friend, Angela? Her restaurant is a drop site. Stop. Marco's voice was barely a whisper. Just stop. I can't stop. Because Melissa either figured out who I really am or someone told her, and she tried to kill me and our daughter yesterday. And there's a surveillance car from one of Russo's front companies parked outside our house right now, which means we're both in danger. The waitress arrived with their drinks, her timing spectacularly bad. They sat in silence while she poured, her cheerful comments about the weather dying when she registered the tension at their table. After she left, Marco wrapped both hands around his coffee mug like it was an anchor in a storm. How much of it was real, he asked finally, his voice raw. The woman I fell in love with, the marriage, the life we built, how much of Sofia Chen actually exists? All of it. She wanted to reach across the table again but didn't dare. Marco, I know this is impossible to understand right now. I know I've broken your trust in ways I can't fix. But everything I told you about myself, my childhood in Taipei, my parents' restaurant, my love of old movies and terrible puns, that's all true. The only thing that was false was my job and my reasons for being in Oak Park. Your reasons for being with me, you mean? No. My reasons for being with you are that you're kind and funny and brilliant. That you make me laugh and you challenge me and you see the world in ways I never considered. That you once spent 3 hours researching the best prenatal vitamins because you wanted to make sure our daughter had everything she needed. Sofia felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. I fell in love with you despite it complicating my operation, not because of it. Marrying you made my job infinitely harder because it meant I had something to lose. Marco was quiet for a long time, processing, calculating. When he finally looked up, his expression was guarded but not completely closed off. What happens now? My handler wants me to extract immediately. End my cover, enter protective custody with you, and let them rebuild the investigation without me. But if I do that, we lose 2 years of work. The grand jury hearing is in 3 weeks. If I can hold out until then, we can take down the entire network in one coordinated sweep. Hold out? Marco's voice went sharp with alarm. Sofia, someone tried to drug you yesterday. There's a surveillance team outside our house. You're 8 months pregnant. You really think staying undercover for 3 more weeks is a good idea? I think it's the only way to make sure Melissa and everyone else involved faces justice for what they tried to do. She met his eyes steadily. And I think it's the only way to protect you long term. If I extract now, the investigation falls apart. Some people get arrested on what we have, but not everyone. And the ones who don't. They'll know someone talked. They'll look for the leak. They'll remember that I was asking questions, that I had access to information I shouldn't have had. And they'll come after me, Marco finished quietly. They'll come after you and our daughter and anyone else they think might have been involved. But if we see this through, if we get them all in the coordinated takedown, then it's over. Complete. They'll be too busy dealing with federal charges to worry about revenge. Marco drained his coffee in one long swallow and gestured for a refill when the waitress passed. Outside the diner's windows, the sun was beginning to rise, painting the Chicago sky in shades of amber and rose. A new day was starting, but it felt like the end of something Sofia couldn't name. Tell me about the operation, Marco said finally. All of it. If my family is involved, if my sister tried to kill my wife and daughter, I need to know everything. So Sofia told him. About Victor Russo's network that moved heroin and fentanyl through the Midwest with military precision. About the web of seemingly legitimate businesses that served as fronts and distribution points. About how she'd built her cover identity over 2 years, carefully cultivating relationships and establishing herself as someone trustworthy, someone forgettable, someone who wouldn't be suspected. She told him about discovering his Uncle Tony's involvement 6 months into their marriage, about the sick feeling when she'd realized the investigation she'd been building had spread its roots into her husband's family. About the impossible choice between her duty as an agent and her love for him. I almost requested extraction then, she admitted. When I found out about Tony. My handler said I could transfer off the case, that we had enough evidence to move forward without me. But I knew if I left, Tony might escape prosecution. There wouldn't be enough to charge him definitively. He'd go free, and eventually, he'd pull other people into his business. Maybe even you or your future children. So you stayed to protect me. Marco's voice was impossible to read. Or to use me. Both, Sofia said, because honesty was all she had left to give him. I stayed because abandoning the investigation meant abandoning justice for the families destroyed by the drugs Tony helped distribute. But I also stayed because I couldn't bear the thought of you finding out years from now that your uncle was a criminal and I'd known and said nothing. I wanted to protect you from that. I wanted to protect our daughter from growing up with that shadow over her family. Marco was silent again, his engineer's mind clearly working through the logic, weighing variables, and calculating outcomes. Sofia knew this look. She'd seen it when he designed bridges, when he planned their kitchen renovation, when he'd spent 3 months researching the safest car seat for their baby. He was solving a problem, and she could only hope she was part of the solution and not the problem itself. The surveillance car, he said finally. You said it's from one of Russo's front companies. What does that mean, exactly? Are they planning to make another move against you? I don't know yet. It could be reconnaissance, making sure I'm sticking to my routine and not showing signs of suspicion. Or it could be preparation for something more aggressive. Sofia pulled up a photo on her phone showing the sedan from multiple angles. My team has been monitoring them since we noticed the tail. So far, they haven't made any contact attempts, but we're ready to intervene if they do. Your team. Marco said the words like they tasted strange. I don't even know what that means. Do you have like, a whole DEA squad backing you up? I have a handler, Assistant Director James Walsh. I have a partner, Agent Rachel Kim, who you met yesterday at the shower. And I have a tactical support unit that can deploy within minutes if I signal that I need extraction or assistance. She paused. Rachel's been my best friend for 8 years. Everything else about her is real too, the stories she told you about growing up in California, her terrible taste in romantic comedies, all of it. The only lie was me being an accountant. Rachel's DA too. It wasn't a question. Jesus. How many people in my life are federal agents? Just us. I promise. Everyone else, your friends, your coworkers, the people at your gym, they're exactly who they appear to be. This operation was specific and targeted. We weren't infiltrating your entire social network, Marco. We were investigating a drug distribution ring that happened to overlap with people you knew. The waitress returned with their check, and Marco pulled out his wallet automatically before freezing. Do I even know what our financial situation is? Are we actually financially stable, or is that part of your cover too? We're actually stable. The DEA pays me a good salary, better than what an accountant would make, actually. The money I contribute to our household expenses is real. The savings account for the baby, the fund for her college, all of that is legitimate. Sofia reached for the check. Though technically, the DEA has been reimbursing us for certain expenses that were operation-related. Those will stop once I'm out of the field. Marco let her take the check, but his expression was complicated. Operation-related expenses. Like what? Like the security system we installed last year. And the membership at the country club where the shower was held. Melissa's family has been members for years, and I needed access to gather information about their financial transactions. Sofia pulled out cash to pay, not wanting to leave a credit card trail. The nursery furniture was ours, though. That was us. Good to know the crib isn't some kind of FBI-grade surveillance equipment. Despite everything, Sofia almost smiled at the bitter humor in his voice. It was a sign that Marco was still in there, still processing, not completely lost to anger and betrayal. They drove back toward Oak Park in silence, but instead of going home, Sofia directed Marco to a safe house the DEA maintained in a nearby suburb. It was an anonymous ranch house that could have been anywhere in America, beige siding, standard landscaping, absolutely nothing memorable about it. "Where are we?" Marco asked as she pulled into the garage. "Somewhere Russo's people don't know about. Somewhere we can talk safely without worrying about surveillance." She closed the garage door behind them and led him inside, her weapon drawn until she'd cleared the rooms. Old habits died hard. The safe house was furnished with the kind of generic furniture that came from office supply stores, a couch that was neither comfortable nor uncomfortable, a dining table with chairs that matched nothing, a bed that existed purely for function. It looked exactly like what it was, a place where people hid temporarily, where no one actually lived. Sofia made tea while Marco sat on the couch, staring at the blank walls like they might reveal answers he desperately needed. When she brought him a mug, he took it but didn't drink, just held it between his hands. "I need to ask you something," he said quietly. "And I need you to tell me the truth. Anything. When you found out you were pregnant, when we took that test together and I cried and you laughed, was any part of you thinking about how a baby would make your cover more believable? How being a pregnant woman would make you seem more innocent, less threatening?" The question hit Sofia like a physical blow, not because it was unfair but because she'd asked herself the same thing in the dark hours of early pregnancy, when nausea and fear had kept her awake while Marco slept peacefully beside her. "Yes," she said, and watched pain flash across his face. "For about 5 minutes, right after we got that positive result, my training kicked in and I calculated how the pregnancy would affect my operational effectiveness. I thought about how I could use it to seem more vulnerable, more trustworthy. And then I went into the bathroom and cried because I was so ashamed of myself for thinking that way about our child." She set down her own tea and moved to kneel in front of him, ignoring the awkwardness of maneuvering her pregnant body into the position. "Marco, look at me. Please." Reluctantly, he met her eyes. "I'm not going to lie and say that my training doesn't affect how I see the world. It does. I've spent 14 years learning to read people, to look for advantages, to think tactically about every situation. But that's not who I am with you. That's not who I am about our daughter." Her voice broke slightly. "She kicks me every morning at 6 a.m. She gets hiccups every time I eat chocolate. She's going to have your smile and my stubbornness and probably your mother's talent for guilt tripping. She's not an operational asset. She's our little girl." Marco's hand moved to her belly before he could stop himself, finding the spot where their daughter was currently practicing her gymnastics routine. His expression softened fractionally when he felt her kick. "I don't know how to reconcile this," he said quietly. "The Sofia I thought I knew with the federal agent you actually are. The woman who cried at baby commercials with someone who carries a gun and lies professionally. How do I know which version is real? They're both real. I'm both people." Sofia covered his hand with hers. "I'm a woman who loves terrible reality TV and makes amazing dumplings and cries at sappy movies. And I'm also someone who can take down a drug dealer in hand-to-hand combat and testify in federal court without flinching. Those things don't contradict each other, Marco. They're just different facets of the same person. But you lied to me. Every single day for 6 years, you lied about something fundamental to who you are. I did. And I can't change that. I can't take back the deception or make it hurt less." She squeezed his hand gently. "All I can do is tell you that from this moment forward, I will never lie to you again. Not about my work, not about the danger, not about anything. You'll know everything I know, even the parts I'm technically not supposed to share with civilians. Don't call me a civilian." There was unexpected heat in his voice. "That makes it sound like I'm some kind of bystander in my own life. I'm your husband. I'm your daughter's father. I'm the person whose sister tried to poison you yesterday. I'm not a civilian, Sofia. I'm a participant whether I wanted to be or not." She recognized the anger underneath his words, not at her, exactly, but at the situation, at having his agency stolen by circumstances beyond his control. She'd felt that anger herself when she'd first realized the full scope of her family's involvement in the case. "You're right," she said. "I'm sorry. You're not a bystander. You're the person who deserves to make informed decisions about his own safety and future. Then here's my decision." Marco set down his tea and pulled Sofia up to sit beside him on the couch, his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that felt more protective than affectionate. "We see this through. You stay undercover for the next 3 weeks until the grand jury hearing. You get the evidence you need to put all these people away, including my sister and uncle and whoever else in my family is involved." But, Sofia prompted when he paused. "But I'm not sitting at home pretending everything is normal while you're in danger. If you're staying undercover, then I'm helping you. I'm your backup, your second set of eyes, whatever you need. Because like you said, we're in this together now." Sofia felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Marco, I can't let you can't stop me," he interrupted. "I'm already involved. Russo's people are watching our house. My family is under investigation. My sister tried to drug my pregnant wife. I'm not sitting on the sidelines because you think it's too dangerous. If it's too dangerous for me, it's too dangerous for you and our baby." She studied his face, seeing the determination there, the stubborn set to his jaw that she recognized from arguments about which way to arrange the living room furniture. When Marco made up his mind about something, he was immovable as bedrock. "Okay," she said finally. "But you have to follow my lead. If I say run, you run. If I say stay quiet, you stay quiet. And if I say it's time to extract, we extract. No arguments, no second guessing. My operational experience is the only thing keeping us alive right now. Deal?" He pulled her closer, and for the first time since she'd revealed the truth, Sofia let herself relax into his embrace. "So what's the plan, Agent Chen?" Over the next hour, Sofia laid out the operational details Marco needed to know. About the grand jury hearing scheduled for 3 weeks from now, when prosecutors would present evidence against Victor Russo and 47 other defendants in a massive RICO case. About the coordinated arrests planned for the day after the hearing, when tactical teams would simultaneously raid 23 locations across Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. About the role Marco would play in maintaining her cover while also helping to gather the final pieces of evidence they needed. "Your Uncle Tony is having a meeting tomorrow night," Sofia explained, pulling up surveillance photos on her tablet. "At his office in the city. We've had the space bug for 6 months. But we need someone physically present who can report on the body language and dynamics that audio surveillance can't capture. Someone who has a legitimate reason to be there." "You want me to go to Uncle Tony's office during a meeting with drug dealers?" Marco said it like a statement, not a question. "I want you to stop by to drop off the casserole your mother made for him. She mentioned it at the shower, remember? You're the dutiful nephew checking on your uncle. You stay for 5 minutes, make small talk, then leave. But while you're there, you observe. You note who's present, how comfortable they are with each other, whether Tony seems nervous or in control. And if they realize I'm gathering intelligence, they won't. You're a structural engineer worried about your pregnant wife. You have no reason to be suspicious of your uncle's business dealings. As far as anyone knows, you're exactly what you appear to be, a man who loves his family and trusts them completely." Sofia pulled up more photos. "These are the people we expect to be at the meeting. Memorize their faces. If you see anyone else, text me immediately." Marco studied the images, his expression growing darker as he recognized several faces. "This guy," he pointed to a heavy-set man with a scar across his left cheek, "he was at our wedding. He gave us that expensive knife set. Frank Delgado. He's Russo's head of distribution. The knife set was probably purchased with drug money." Sofia closed the tablet. "I'm sorry, Marco. I know this is hard." "Hard?" He laughed without humor. "That's one word for it. How about completely fucking surreal? Yesterday my biggest worry was whether we had enough diapers ordered. Today I'm memorizing the faces of drug dealers who apparently came to my wedding. If it helps, the knife set is evidence now. It'll be seized during the raids. That actually doesn't help at all. But there was a ghost of a smile on his face, something that gave Sofia hope that maybe, possibly, they could survive this together. They spent the rest of the day at the safe house, with Sofia briefing Marco on security protocols and what to do in various emergency scenarios. She taught him the distress signals she used with Rachel, showed him how to detect surveillance, walked him through the basics of tactical awareness that had become second nature to her over the years. By evening, Marco's head was clearly spinning with information overload, but he was absorbing it with the same methodical precision he brought to his engineering work. Sofia recognized the pattern. Her husband processed stress by organizing information, by building mental frameworks that made chaos comprehensible. "We should go home," Marco said finally, checking his watch. "If we're gone too long, it'll look suspicious to whoever's watching the house. We'll go home tomorrow morning. Tonight we stay here where it's safe." Sofia pulled blankets from a storage closet. "The surveillance team thinks we drove to my aunt's house for dinner. Rachel sent them a fake text from my phone with a photo from my aunt's last birthday party. They don't know we're here." Marco looked around the safe house, the generic furniture, the blank walls, the absence of anything personal or comfortable. "This is what your life was like before me, wasn't it? Living in places like this, always ready to disappear." "Sometimes. Other times I had apartments under my cover identities. But yeah, there were months where I lived like this, where everything I owned fit in 2 duffel bags and I could be gone in 60 seconds if I needed to be." Sofia sat beside him on the couch, their bodies touching from shoulder to knee. "I don't miss it, if that's what you're wondering. I don't miss the loneliness or the isolation or the constant vigilance. What we have, our home, our life together, that's what makes all of this worth it." "Does it?" Marco's voice was quiet. "Is it worth it? The lying, the danger, the fact that my sister tried to kill you because of your job?" Sofia was silent for a long moment, considering the question seriously. 3 years ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. The mission was everything. Every arrest, every prosecution, every dealer taken off the streets, that justified any personal cost. But now... She placed Marco's hand on her belly where their daughter was sleeping, her movements just tiny flutters beneath the skin. "Now I think about what kind of world I want her to grow up in. And yes, I want it to be a world where drug dealers face consequences for destroying lives. But I also want it to be a world where she can trust the people around her. Where her mother doesn't lie to her father. Where family means something. So after this operation, you're done? After this operation, I'm requesting a desk assignment. Analysis, training, maybe recruiting at Quantico. I'm done being in the field." It was the first time Sofia had said the words aloud, and they felt both terrifying and freeing. "Our daughter deserves a mother who comes home every night. You deserve a wife who doesn't have to lie about her job. I've spent 14 years fighting this war, and I'm proud of that. But I'm also ready to let someone else carry the weight for a while." Marco pulled her closer, and they sat in silence as the light faded outside the safe house windows. Sofia felt her daughter kick lazily, already comfortable with her father's voice and touch. In 3 weeks, she'd be born into chaos, federal raids and family arrests, and a grandmother who would have to explain to everyone why her daughter and brother were being led away in handcuffs. But she'd also be born into safety. Into a world where her mother had fought to make sure that the people who tried to harm her faced justice. Into a family that, however damaged, had chosen truth over comfortable lies. "I love you," Marco said quietly. "I'm angry and hurt and I don't know if I can ever fully trust you again. But I love you, Sofia. Both versions of you. The accountant who cried at baby commercials and the federal agent who carries a gun. All of it." Sofia turned in his arms and kissed him, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. "I love you too. More than I've ever loved anything. More than I thought I could love someone while still doing this job." They made up the safe house bed together, and for the first time in 6 years, Sofia didn't have to hide who she was. She cleaned her weapon while Marco watched, showed him the body armor she kept in her go bag, explained the communications equipment she used to stay in contact with her team. And when they finally turned off the lights, Sofia lay awake listening to her husband breathe, feeling their daughter move beneath her heart, and prayed that the next 3 weeks would pass without anyone else trying to destroy the fragile, complicated, completely real family they'd built together. The next morning dawned cold and gray, matching Sofia's mood as she and Marco drove back to their house in Oak Park. The surveillance car was still parked down the street, a reminder that pretending everything was normal didn't make it so. "Remember," Sofia said as they pulled into their driveway. "We had a lovely evening at my aunt's house. We ate too much, stayed too late, came home tired. You're going to work today like usual. I'm going to do some nesting at home and maybe meet Rachel for lunch. And tonight I'm dropping off Mom's casserole to Uncle Tony." Marco's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I still can't believe we're doing this." "You don't have to. It's not too late to change your mind. I can have Rachel make the drop instead." "No." His voice was firm. "I'm doing this. For you. For our daughter. For every family that's been destroyed by the poison Tony helped distribute." He turned to look at her. "But Sofia, after tonight, when I look at my uncle and see a criminal instead of family, I don't know if I can come back from that. I don't know if my relationship with my family will ever be the same." "It won't be," Sofia said gently. "I'm not going to lie to you about that. After the arrests, after the trials, your family will be divided between the people who understand why this had to happen and the people who will blame you for not warning them. Some bridges will burn, Marco. You need to be prepared for that." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the house they'd bought together, the home they'd filled with plans and dreams, and now with a complicated truth that changed everything. "My mother will never forgive me." It wasn't a question, but Sofia answered anyway. "Probably not. Lucia loves her brother. Even when she learns what he's done, she'll struggle to accept it. And she'll look for someone to blame besides him. That someone will likely be you. And me. She already doesn't like you very much." "I know." Sofia had long ago accepted that her mother-in-law tolerated her at best. Lucia Hartley had made it clear that she'd hoped Marco would marry a nice Italian girl, preferably one who attended the same church and understood family traditions. Sofia, with her Taiwanese heritage and her quiet independence, had always been an outsider. But after this, it's going to be worse. I'm the federal agent who destroyed her family. I'm the woman who lied to her son. I'm the reason her brother and daughter are going to prison. They're the reason they're going to prison. They made their choices." But Marco's voice lacked conviction. He was already mourning the family relationships that were about to die. Inside the house, Sofia went through the motions of her cover identity, checking online for baby supplies, texting with Rachel about lunch plans, straightening the nursery that was almost ready for their daughter. All while wearing a wireless earpiece that kept her connected to her team, listening to chatter about overnight surveillance reports and updated risk assessments. At noon, Rachel arrived with takeout from their favorite Thai place, the same restaurant where they'd met for lunch dozens of times over the past 2 years. But today felt different. Today Marco knew who Rachel really was, and the comfortable fiction that had made their friendship easy was gone. "So," Rachel said after they'd settled at the kitchen table with pad thai and spring rolls. "This is weird, right? Me being here now that everything's out in the open?" "Everything's weird now," Sofia replied, stabbing at her noodles without much appetite. "But at least I don't have to lie about what we're talking about." Rachel glanced toward the living room where Marco sat pretending to watch basketball highlights while obviously listening to every word. "How's he handling it?" "Better than I deserve. Worse than I'd hoped." Sofia kept her voice low even though she knew Marco could hear. "He's agreed to help with the observation tonight, but I don't think he's processed what that really means yet." "And after? When the arrests happen and his family is in cuffs?" "I don't know. We haven't talked about that yet." Sofia pressed her hand to her belly where her daughter was awake and active. I'm trying to focus on getting through the next 3 weeks without anyone else getting hurt. Rachel's expression turned serious. Speaking of which, we got the analysis back on Melissa's phone records. She's made 17 calls to Frank Delgado in the past month. Always from burner phones, always short conversations. But the pattern suggests she's been in regular contact with Russo's enforcement team. She knows what I am. It wasn't a question. Sofia had suspected as much since the moment she'd smelled the GHB in her drink. How did she find out? We're still piecing that together. Best guess is that someone in Russo's organization recognized you from a previous operation. Maybe someone you arrested years ago who's been released, or a target who got away and remembered your face. Once they identified you, they would have looked at everyone in your life. When they realized your sister-in-law was dating one of their dealers, wait. Sofia set down her fork. Melissa's dating someone in the organization? Who? Rachel pulled out her phone and showed Sofia a surveillance photo of Melissa with a man Sofia had seen in dozens of case files. Anthony Rossi. Mid-level distributor, handles most of the western suburbs. He's been with Russo's crew for 8 years, moved up from street dealing to management. Smart, careful, no arrests since his early 20s. Sofia studied the photo, seeing the way Melissa looked at Anthony with obvious affection, the way his arm curved possessively around her waist. She loves him. Looks that way. Which means when we arrest him, Melissa won't just lose her boyfriend. She'll lose the man she was probably planning to marry. Rachel pulled up more photos. They've been together for 6 months. He bought her that car she's been driving. Took her on vacation to Miami in July. Classic grooming behavior, overwhelm her with gifts and attention so she'll be loyal when things get complicated. Does she know what he does? Hard to say for sure, but probably. Melissa's not stupid, and Anthony isn't exactly subtle. She's been at his apartment when deliveries were made. She's attended parties with known dealers. At minimum, she's willfully blind. More likely, she's actively involved in some capacity. Sofia felt something hard settle in her chest. She tried to kill me to protect him. To protect their life together. That's our working theory. Anthony found out you were DEA, told Melissa, and she decided to eliminate the threat before you could bring down her boyfriend's entire organization. Rachel's voice was carefully neutral, professional. Which means she's going to be charged as an accessory to attempted murder of a federal officer, plus conspiracy, plus whatever else we can prove she knew about the distribution network. Marco's going to destroy himself over this. Marco's going to have to learn that his sister made her own choices. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed Sofia's hand. Just like you had to learn that you're not responsible for other people's decisions, even when they're family. They finished lunch making small talk for Marco's benefit, discussing baby names and nursery colors and whether Sofia should pack an early hospital bag. Normal conversation between two friends, except for the weapons they both wore concealed and the tactical planning happening beneath every casual word. After Rachel left, Sofia found Marco in the nursery, standing beside the crib they'd assembled together 3 months ago. His hands gripped the railing hard enough that his knuckles had gone white. "I heard," he said without turning around. "About Melissa and Anthony Rossi. About why she tried to drug you." Sofia stood beside him, both of them staring at the empty crib that would soon hold their daughter. "I'm sorry, Marco. Don't apologize. You didn't make her fall in love with a drug dealer. You didn't make her try to poison you." His voice was rough with suppressed emotion. "But I keep thinking, if I'd been paying attention, if I'd asked her more questions about this Anthony guy, maybe I could have stopped her before it got this far. You couldn't have known." Melissa hit it well. Even our surveillance team didn't realize how deep their relationship was until recently. "My little sister." Marco's voice cracked. "I used to walk her to school. I taught her to ride a bike. I beat up Tommy Martinez in 8th grade because he made her cry. And now she's going to prison for trying to kill my wife and daughter." Sofia wrapped her arms around him from behind, her belly pressing against his back, and felt him shake with the force of emotions he was trying to contain. "I know. I'm so sorry." They stood like that for a long time, surrounded by the cheerful yellow walls and the stuffed animals they'd chosen together, mourning the future they'd thought they'd have and preparing for the harder one they'd chosen. That evening, Marco drove to his uncle's construction office in downtown Chicago, carrying his mother's homemade lasagna in a glass casserole dish. Sofia listened through his cell phone, which she'd modified to function as a transmitter, while Rachel monitored from a van 2 blocks away. "Just act natural," Sofia murmured into her microphone, knowing Marco could hear her through the earpiece hidden beneath his collar. "You're the dutiful nephew. You're tired from work. Your wife is driving you crazy with nesting behavior. This is just a quick drop-off." She heard Marco take a deep breath before knocking on the office door. Then Tony's familiar voice, warm and welcoming, "Marco. Come in, come in. What brings you by? Mom made lasagna for you. You know how she is, she's convinced you're not eating properly." Marco's voice sounded natural, easy, exactly like it should. Sofia felt a flutter of pride mixed with guilt that she'd put him in this position. "Your mother is a saint. Come, sit. Have a beer with your old uncle." Through the audio feed, Sofia heard movement, the clink of bottles being opened, chairs scraping across floor. Then other voices joining the conversation, and she recognized them immediately from hours of surveillance recordings: Frank Delgado, Anthony Rossi, and Victor Russo himself. Her pulse quickened. They hadn't expected Russo to be there in person. He usually sent lieutenants to meetings with lower-level operators like Tony. His presence suggested something important was happening, something worth the risk of being physically present. "Marco, you remember Frank from your wedding," Tony was saying. "And this is Anthony and Victor. Friends of mine from way back. Nice to meet you." Marco's voice remained steady, but Sofia could hear the slight strain underneath. He was thinking about Melissa's boyfriend, about the drug dealers pretending to be legitimate businessmen, about the evidence he was gathering just by being in the room. "So, Marco, your uncle tells us you're going to be a father soon," Victor Russo said, his voice smooth and cultured. He sounded like someone's favorite professor, not like the man responsible for flooding Chicago with heroin and fentanyl. "Congratulations." "Thank you. We're excited." "A little terrified, but excited." It was a good answer, exactly the kind of thing a supportive husband would say. But Sofia caught the look Melissa and Anthony exchanged, something that suggested this piece of information was being filed away for later analysis. Dinner was the usual chaos of a large Italian family, with multiple conversations happening simultaneously and enough food to feed an army. Sofia found herself seated between Marco's grandmother and one of his younger cousins, both of whom peppered her with questions about the pregnancy, the nursery, whether she and Marco had chosen names yet. "We're thinking Emma Grace," Sofia said, offering the lie they'd agreed on. Their daughter's real name, Lily Rose, would stay private until after the arrests, an additional layer of protection. "After Marco's great-grandmother and my mother." Across the table, she could see Melissa watching her with unusual intensity. Not hostile exactly, but assessing. Looking for cracks in the facade, for anything that didn't align with the picture of Sofia as harmless accountant and soon-to-be mother. After dinner, while Marco helped clear dishes, Melissa cornered Sofia in the kitchen with a glass of wine and an expression that was equal parts friendly and predatory. "So," Melissa said, leaning against the counter. "How are you really doing? I know pregnancy can be hard, especially the third trimester. Are you feeling overwhelmed?" "Sometimes," Sofia admitted, because denial would seem suspicious. "The nesting instinct is intense. I keep reorganizing the nursery closet like the baby will care how her onesies are folded." Melissa laughed, but her eyes remained sharp. "And Marco? How's he handling impending fatherhood?" "He's wonderful. Nervous, but wonderful. He talks to my belly every night, telling the baby about his day." Sofia smiled, and this part at least was true. "I think he's going to be an amazing father. He's always been good with kids." Used to babysit me when we were younger, even though he complained about it constantly. Melissa's expression softened momentarily before hardening again. Did he tell you about visiting Uncle Tony's office this week? The question was casual, but Sofia felt the trap underneath it. He mentioned dropping off your mom's lasagna. Why? No reason. Just curious if he said anything about Tony's friends who were there. Marco can be judgmental about people he doesn't know. If he met anyone, he didn't mention it. Sofia kept her voice light, disinterested. You know how Marco is, he barely notices people unless they're talking about structural engineering or baseball statistics. It was exactly the right thing to say, apparently, because Melissa visibly relaxed. God, you're right. Last Thanksgiving he spent 2 hours explaining load distribution to Anthony while the rest of us watched the game. Your husband is wonderful, but he's not exactly socially observant. They continued chatting for another 10 minutes, Melissa probing gently while Sofia maintained her cover with the ease of 14 years' practice. By the time Marco came looking for her, claiming they needed to leave so Sofia could rest, Melissa seemed satisfied that nothing was amiss. In the car driving home, Sofia let her guard drop for the first time in hours, exhaling tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She was definitely testing me. Looking for anything that doesn't fit. I know. I saw. Marco's hands were tight on the steering wheel. Anthony was doing the same thing to me during the football game. Asking about my job, about our finances, about whether I knew any of Tony's business associates. What did you tell him? The truth, mostly. That I'm an engineer who barely understands Tony's business. That we're comfortable financially but not wealthy. That I'm focused on becoming a dad and don't pay much attention to my uncle's friends. Marco glanced at her. He seemed to buy it. But Sof, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Being around Melissa, knowing what she tried to do to you, and having to smile and make small talk about the baby she tried to harm, it's destroying me. I know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. This isn't your fault. Marco pulled into their driveway and killed the engine. But we need to talk about what happens after. After the arrests, after the trials, when my entire family knows I was part of taking them down. Where do we go from there? Sofia had been dreading this conversation, but Marco deserved answers. Wherever you want. We can stay in Chicago if you think you can rebuild relationships with the family members who weren't involved. Or we can relocate. The DEA has resources for witness protection scenarios, though I don't think we'll need that extreme of a solution. But we'll never be able to come back to normal, will we? This house, this neighborhood, Sunday dinners at my parents' house, all of that is gone. Yes, Sofia said quietly. That's gone. I'm sorry, Marco. I know that's not what you signed up for when you married me. He was silent for a long time, staring at their house where lights glowed warmly in windows and their unborn daughter's nursery waited for her arrival. I signed up to spend my life with you. For better or worse, in sickness and health. I just didn't realize worse would mean losing my family. You're not losing all of them. Your cousins who aren't involved, your grandmother, some of your aunts and uncles, they'll understand eventually. And you're gaining our daughter. Our little family. Is it enough? Marco turned to look at her in the dim light of the car's interior. Is just us enough when we lose everything else? Sofia took his hand and placed it on her belly where their daughter was awake and restless. I don't know. But I think we have to believe it can be. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? They sat in the car until the autumn chill made them shiver, then went inside to their house that was both sanctuary and stage set, both home and operational base. And Sofia uploaded the evening's intelligence to her encrypted server while Marco showered away the stress of lying to everyone he loved. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of careful pretense and mounting tension. Sofia attended prenatal appointments where her obstetrician expressed concern about her elevated stress levels. She met Rachel for lunch while both of them monitored Russo's increasingly aggressive investigation into Sofia's background. She helped Marco prepare for his testimony before the grand jury, running through questions prosecutors would ask and warnings about defense attorneys' tricks. And she felt her daughter grow stronger and more restless, pressing against her ribs in ways that made breathing difficult, kicking at odd hours as if eager to escape into a world that was about to become very complicated. 14 days before the grand jury hearing, Sofia's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. She was alone in the house, Marco at work, folding tiny onesies in the nursery when the message appeared, cover compromised. Russo has Taipei contact who remembers you from 2015 operation. Recommend immediate extraction. Her hands stilled on the soft cotton as her mind raced through implications. The 2015 operation had been her second undercover assignment, a heroin trafficking ring with connections to organized crime in Taiwan. She'd spent 6 months in Taipei building the case, using her language skills and cultural knowledge to infiltrate the network. 23 people had been arrested, including several high-ranking triad members. One of those people had been released recently. And somehow, they'd made their way to Chicago and recognized Sofia's face from 9 years ago. She called Rachel immediately. How bad is it? Bad. The contact ID'd you from surveillance photos Russo's people have been taking. He's meeting with Russo and Frank Delgado tonight to confirm your identity. Once that happens, you have maybe 6 hours before they move against you. What about Marco? Is he safe at his office? We have a team moving to secure him now. But Sofia, you need to evacuate immediately. Grab your go bag, head to the safe house, and let us handle the extraction. Sofia looked around the nursery, the yellow walls, the carefully chosen furniture, the mobile hanging above the crib that played Brahms's lullaby. She thought about giving birth in protective custody, about her daughter being born while federal marshals stood guard, about Marco never getting to experience the joy of bringing their baby home to this room they'd prepared with such love and hope. No, she said quietly. I'm not running. Sofia, Rachel, we're 13 days from the grand jury hearing. 13 days from taking down the entire network in one coordinated operation. If I extract now, we lose everything. Russo and his people scatter. Some get arrested on what we have, but not all. And the ones who escape. Sofia felt her daughter kick as if agreeing with her. They'll spend years looking for revenge against anyone they think betrayed them. Which means Marco and our baby will never be truly safe. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we move up the timeline. Contact the prosecutors, tell them we need an emergency grand jury session. Present what we have now instead of waiting 2 more weeks. Sofia was already mentally cataloging evidence, calculating what they could prove versus what they'd hoped to prove given more time. It won't be as comprehensive, but it'll be enough to get indictments on the major players. Rachel was quiet on the other end of the line, consulting with someone else, probably Walsh, her handler. Finally, Walsh says we can have an emergency grand jury convened within 48 hours. But Sofia, that means you have to stay in cover for 2 more days while Russo knows who you are. The risk is, I know the risk. I've been doing this job for 14 years. I know what I'm choosing. Okay. But you're not staying in that house alone. I'm coming over, and we're fortifying your position until Marco gets home and we can move you both to secure location. Frank Delgado's trial was shorter, and his conviction was even more decisive. The evidence against him was overwhelming: surveillance footage, recorded conversations, financial documentation. He took a plea deal before sentencing, agreeing to testify against the remaining defendants in exchange for a reduced sentence. 25 years instead of life. Tony's trial was the hardest for Marco to watch. His uncle sat at the defense table looking older and smaller than Marco remembered, his expensive suits replaced by courtroom attire that couldn't hide how diminished he'd become. Tony's lawyer argued that he'd been coerced, that he'd laundered money under duress, that he'd been trying to protect his family from retaliation. The jury didn't buy it. Tony was convicted of money laundering, conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, and racketeering. His sentence, 15 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole after serving 85% of his time. Lucia Hartley sat in the courtroom gallery for every day of her brother's trial, her face frozen in an expression of devastated disbelief. She didn't look at Marco or Sofia, didn't acknowledge their presence even when they passed in the corridor. When Tony was led away in handcuffs, she finally broke, sobbing so loudly that the judge had to pause proceedings. Marco tried to approach his mother after the verdict, but she turned away from him, and his father, quiet, steady Robert, who'd always been the family's emotional anchor, placed himself between them. "You're not welcome," Robert said quietly. "At our home, at family gatherings, anywhere the Hartley name still means something. You made your choice, Marco. Now live with it." Sofia watched her husband's face crumble and wanted to intervene, to defend him, to explain that Marco had chosen justice over family loyalty and that choice deserved respect, not rejection. But Rachel's hand on her arm stopped her, and they stood silently while Marco absorbed his parents' rejection.